Hello, friends! Welcome to Coding Garden with CJ. Welcome to a Feathers Chill stream number 4, the fourth one we've done so far. So essentially, I am going through. Oh, is that image is on top? I'm messing with some new logos. Let me fix that. This bring to top. I don't know if you can hear that. There's a thunderstorm headed my way. Ta-da! Okay, I'm on top of it. Cool. Welcome to the show. So I am recording tutorials for the Feathers guide. I've been going through the guide and we'll continue doing that today. Let's say hello to everyone who's here. Hello, Daniel Garden. Welcome to the stream. And yes, this is long live streams that'll eventually be edited down to very consumable short videos. And hello, Solon, who says, is this a new logo? Why, yes, it is. Actually, yeah, if we look at my YouTube channel, you can see the logo. I'm working on a new website, working on a new intro. But yes, this is the new logo, Simplicity. Hello, Elka, welcome to the stream. And this is another thing we figured out. My logo basically works as an emoji. The image we have isn't an emoji, but you can make it with an emoji, which is awesome. And hello, Harsh. Thanks, and welcome. Hello, Bohan. Hello, Mark from Berlin, who says first time after Lollapalooza party. Best teacher alive. Keep going. Thank you so much. Hello, Daiquiri. And hello, Kelly, who says they love the sound of thunder. I'm okay with it. It could get pretty bad pretty soon. Hopefully the power won't go out. Hello, Baro. Welcome to the stream. Cool. And so, yeah, I've been recording a lot of videos. Essentially, we're here, honestly. We generated the app, and really the next video is to talk about what configure functions are. But yeah. Hello, Makita, who says, just wanted to say thank you from the deep of my heart for your CRUD series. It helped me a lot, and I learned a lot with that one. That's awesome. Glad you liked it. No worries, Baro. Yeah, we'll see you later. Get some rest. Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into it, because we got lots to do. So, I believe we made a directory called Feathers Chat. And this is where we are. Let's open it up with code. We basically just generated the app. We talked through what all of this stuff is. And the next thing is I'm going to talk about, excuse me, the configure function, which is what we see all over the place. Now I'm contemplating writing my own little version of a configure function to show how that's working. Because it's all over the place in terms of how it's used. But maybe we'll just go through it. So it's not going to take much to talk about, and then I'll decide if I do want to show an example. But also, maybe I can't record this with all the thunder in the background. I definitely won't be able to edit that out. Let me know how loud that thunder is, if it comes through while I'm recording this stuff. Because if that's the case, we'll just turn this into a Hangout Q&A stream, and I'll record these at another time in a closed-off, soundproof room instead of where I am right now. Cool, but let's go ahead and record that tutorial. Hello, Nat from New Zealand. Welcome to the stream. Here we go. Let me hide my taskbar up top. Cool. Let's take a quick stretch. And remember to turn off my break timer while I am recording tutorials. Let's postpone this for 15 minutes. Cool. All right, hide my face. In this tutorial, we will... What will we do? I just want to verify with the guides here. Most important pattern used to generate in the generated application splits things up individual files. Cool. All right. We'll figure out what I'm going to say when I say it. In this video, we will talk about the configure function, which is used all over a generated feathers application. You can see in app.js line 24, we're saying app.configure, and we're passing in the configuration module. If you scroll down a bit, you can see we're saying app.configure, and we're passing in both of our REST and socket.io protocols. And on the next lines, you can see app.configure, where we're passing in each one of the modules that we brought in up at the top of the file. Now, for instance, let's just take a look and see what happens with app.configure services. So if we see right here, services is brought in from the services folder. So we'll look at that. And this exports a function which takes in an app. This is a configure function. You'll see this all over the place. It's essentially just a function that takes in the app variable, and then it can do things with it. In this particular case, you can see that it actually calls app.configure again. So now we know that app.configure accepts a function that takes in the app variable. So if we look at this user service that gets required in, so let's take a look at the user service, we see that it also exports that same configure function. It takes in the app. And this is a really great way to essentially keep your code very modular and have all of your code in different files. And we can see this throughout the application. So we have our services defined in a separate file. We have our middlewares defined in a separate file. Let's take a look at that. And again, this exports a configure function. So the configure function is a function that takes in an app and then can access all of the properties of app, including the app.configure function, so it can go many levels deeper. So it's essentially configure functions all the way down. But what it allows us to do is have nice small files that can still access services off of app or access configuration variables like this. All through this configure function. So that's the basics of the configure function. Anytime you see app.configure, that's essentially what's happening. Whatever is being passed in is a function that accepts app as a variable and then can use the app variable further. And again, you'll see this throughout the Feathers application, and it's a really great tool for splitting up your files and keeping things modular. Okay, I think that's it. I think that's all I needed to say. Cool. And let me know, could you hear the thunder and the rain while that was happening? Hello, Bafana, welcome to the stream. Hello, Bart. Hello, John. Hello, Fruccio. I actually have to listen. I might listen to the playback just to see if there's a lot of background noise. Actually, let me go grab some headphones. I'll be right back. I'm back. Hello, Abdel Hamid. Welcome to the stream. I'm going to listen to my own stream to see if there's weird background noise. I think it's okay. Yeah, I can't really hear it. I guess when I'm editing later, if I can't hear it, I'll have to re-record some of these things, but we should be good. Okay. Right, next video just shows us how to start it, test it, and run the development server. And then we can talk about services. Cool. All right. In terms of continuity, I actually installed some new, like a different emoji font, and so now the emojis in my terminal look different. I wonder if that's gonna be an okay thing. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, next video. Here we go. In this video, I'll show you how to start the app, run the tests, and also start the dev server. So from within the folder where you generated the Express application, you can type npm start, and this will start up node.js, and your application will be available on port 3030, so we can take a look. Awesome, it's working. The thing about this, though, is if we are editing files, we potentially want to restart the server. So instead of just doing npm start, we can do npm run dev, and this will start up nodemon, which will automatically restart the server if we make any changes to the files. So that's great. The other thing we can do is we can run the tests, which I showed were in the test directory. So if I do npm run test, we can see we all have passing tests right now. So that's it for how to run the app. I'll see you in the next video. Woohoo! Cool. Yeah, next video we're going to talk about services. What are we going to talk about with services? You know what I do? I think I'll generate a custom service just to show all of the methods inside of it. Let me do this. If I go to my Feathers chat, wait, thought I had, yeah, Feathers chat, take one. Okay. This is a totally separate app, but I think if I do Feathers generate service, it'll ask me, but if I say custom service, now if we take a look, there's that, and then if we look at the class file, we have all of the methods. Interesting. It's interesting that it comes pre-filled with stuff. Okay, I think that's what I'll do because I can at least show all of the different methods of it. I don't really want to be referencing the guide directly in terms of like showing it on the screen. I mean, this kind of could be in a slide deck. Should I make a slide deck? We all know it takes me usually a very long time to make a slide deck. Yeah. Nat is asking, will I ever finish the question answer app I started with Feathers? Didn't really have any plans on it. We might rebuild it. And I think the one you're referring to is the one that I built with Chad when he came onto the stream. This one. Yeah, but this was a long time ago. Yeah, it was over a year ago. So I think if we finished it, we'd probably just rewrite it with Feathers v4. So. Yeah, let's make a slide deck. I think it makes sense as an introductory thing to services before we jump into code. We can kind of like isolate all of this information. So let's do that. Oh, there's the other logo. The top bar won't go. Yeah, let's do that. Oh, well. New slide deck. We'll call it services.markdown. Services. So this automatically watches with the -W, but last time that was breaking. Let's see if it works. npm start. Yeah, it breaks because it says it found too many files to watch. Let me see if reveal md has any other options for the watch command. Live reload. Using -W, option changes to markdown files render. Okay, but I want it, I guess, to ignore the node modules folder? My keyboard is misbehaving today. Copy. Paste. Maybe I can fix this by increasing like the file count or something like that. How to set the U limit on OS X. Let me Google that. It's gonna search Google for me. Okay, yes, let's search that. U limit. I think I need to do this. I feel like I've done this before. No longer works on Mavericks. Let's just try it. Okay, I need to just unplug my keyboard. The copy paste isn't working. Copy. Paste. Cool. Command not found. 256. Okay. That's too low. To adjust the open file limits, modify this file. And modify another one. Actually, can I just do this? Okay, we're going to modify these files. Doesn't exist. Is this saying I need to create it? What version of a Mac am I on? Mojave. Open file limit Mojave. Thomas says, your videos are really awesome. I learned how to build a full stack app from this channel. That's great. Glad to hear it. Yeah, today is not very exciting. It's raining outside. And trying to fix an issue with my slide deck. Let's take a quick stretch. That didn't help. Ferruccio is saying I do have to create those files. Okay, maybe I will. Yeah, so right now it's 256. That should be a bigger number. Configuration changes are necessary if lower numbers are displayed, which they are. Okay. If the soft limit is too low, set the current session to very large. Hey, that seemed to work. Okay. Not enough. We might need to go bigger. Really big. Okay. Hello, Mustafa from Egypt. Thanks for tuning in. I want to fix this because otherwise my slide deck isn't going to work. FS events. You know, it could be the version of Node I'm using too. Okay, we'll try to create those files. Some set it to over 1 million. Let's do that before we try anything else. We're gonna go to over 1 million. Okay, that's awesome. Fantastic. Okay, you know what? Here's what we do. Here's what we'll do. We won't watch because I'm pretty sure it'll still work. Like if I refresh the page, so don't watch. Cool. But if I change something, services exclamation mark, and I refresh the page, it works. Okay. Okay. That's what I'm gonna do. Man. Okay. John is saying, interesting that you need to increase the file size. So it's the number of watchable files. And I don't think it's Node.js directly. It's this package that my slide deck package is using for watching files for changes and automatically refreshing the browser. But regardless, we just turn that off. We should be good to go. Okay, so we have a slide about services. Let's just take this info. I swear, copy, paste. Let's start here. A service is an object or instance of a class that implements certain methods. Services provide a uniform, protocol-independent interface for how to interact with any kind of data. Let's make that 2 slides. Hello, Abdelaziz, who's finally catching the stream. That's great. Hello, Aman. What are we making? We are making tutorials about the about Feathers.js. So we're actually just going through the guide and building the chat application that it has us build, but we're trying to explain things in depth as we go along. Merchan, and hello Merchan, says, I think this limit is set at the kernel level, so even if the commands are working, you might have to reboot. Oh, okay. Regardless, I'm not even worrying about it now, so should be fine. Cool. We can have a slide about service methods. A tutorial on making I mean, yeah, I guess so. you could learn how I make slide decks and stuff. I don't usually use slide decks when I'm doing tutorials, but I think for this it makes sense. Yeah, let's go to a new slide. Let's make these bold. Can you all hear that rain outside? I feel like it's going to be pretty loud. Italics is good. And hello, James. Did I say hello, hello, James? Welcome. Feathers service methods are those things, and then we'll have a code example. Yeah, I think this is better than actually generating a service because it creates a lot of extra code. So we'll do this. Then we need a code slide. We can say this is JavaScript. Nice. ID, data, and params. Note, a service does not have to implement all of these, but should implement at least one, I think is what that says. Okay, Amon says he can't hear the rain. That's good. However, it's getting bad out there. This note is not appearing. If I do that. Actually, this makes sense to go here. Why can't I see that? Yeah, a service does not have to implement all of these methods, but must have at least one. Cool. Nat says the thunder was loud. I might just create these slide decks, then I can record the stuff later. Cool. I mean, should I create a slide deck? Should I just show the Feathers docs? I mean, technically, I could just show this. That's actually not bad. Can I hide this? I can hide it with CSS. Yeah, I'm gonna create a slide deck. Just for consistency, because the docs might change. My slide deck is mostly generic enough. Cool. We need to create a markdown table. Is there a shortcut for that? I need to look up the syntax for markdown table. Tables. Here we go. Something like this. So we have service method. HTTP method. And the path. Yeah, these actually don't have to line up, but I like them to. Markdown is smart enough to do the right thing. Okay. All right, let's see what we get. That's a table. It's way too big, though. I guess I could decrease the font size. Don't know. I think I'll have two slides. One for gets, and then the last four will be on a separate side. There's our gets. Great, that works. Yeah, so that talks about when it's used as a REST API. And then I think we'll do a table with basically the real-time stuff. So we're basically talking about a service is very generic. You write your code like this, but then automatically it will get mapped as a REST API or get mapped as a real-time API. Skip the break. View toggle word wrap. A registered service will automatically become a node.js event emitter that sends events with the new data when a service method that modifies the data returns. Cool. Put this on a separate slide. Robinson says, wait, I didn't know this channel exists. What is this dark magic? Don't know exactly what you're talking about. The Coding Garden has been around for a year and a half or so now. I think I'll leave that out. Cool. Make another table. This one only has 2 columns. This, oh, not that. This. Great. Great, great, great. Yes. It's storming. It is storming. Registering services. Do I want to talk about that? Yeah, and then when we get to generating service, we'll just write the code to do that. But we will have a slide that tells us how to. Robinson says that the new logo confused them. Yes, we do have a new logo now. And we will have a new intro soon. What's up, Kim Dale? Welcome to the stream. SH. So we have the corresponding events. I guess we can talk about database. Yeah, I definitely want to talk about database adapters. I'm not going to put all of that in there, but I will make a simple little table. Do I need to show the table? I'll show the table. Oh, this was a table. Okay. I'm just thinking, I already have a slide deck that has a bunch of database logos. I don't know if that would make sense to show right here. Yeah, I think I wanna keep it fairly simple, so I'll leave it off. Oh, that's not gonna work. Gonna have to do it manually. In memory, feathers need DB. Local storage and async storage. Feathers local storage. The file system, feathers need DB, which is what we'll be using. MongoDB. Those two. All of these. And Elasticsearch. Let's see. Too much! I think we'll split it up into 2 separate slides again. We'll have one slide with things like in-memory and file system, and then one slide with the major databases. That's great. And that's great too. Cool. Potentially going to get rid of a bunch of the text. Yeah, I think I'm gonna get rid of these two slides and I'll just like say those things when I'm showing the first slide. I don't think I'll talk about the parameters. I guess it'd be good to mention. Yeah, I don't like that those go to new lines. I'll undo that. Yeah, I don't like it. What if I get rid of those spaces? Okay, that kind of works. And then maybe I'll put this one on a new line? That didn't work. It's okay, I guess. Yeah, I think same thing here. I'm not going to show all that text. I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to say that. Just show it. This one too. I kind of just want to show the service method names and not the description. Cool. Robinson is asking, what Cherry MX switches do I like? I am not familiar with mechanical keyboard stuff. I'm just using like the stock switches that came with this keyboard, which I don't think are Cherry MX. They might be like cheap replicas. So. Okay. Let's say feathers services. Cool. I'll be right back. I need to go grab my computer, so I'll have my notes off to the side, and then we'll record the feathers services video. So we're going to generate a service. We'll show what was generated, and then we will customize that service to have a custom create method. Cool. All right, I'll be right back. Hello again. Um, yeah, this is interesting because we generate a service and we actually customize a different service, not the one that we generated. That's okay though. Okay, let's try to do this. Close that. Full screen that. Yeah, I'm gonna get rid of the text on this slide. Actually, I'm not even gonna show that slide because I have the code slide, which says the same thing. That. I really don't like that this is not on the same line. I wonder, does Markdown actually support like new lines inside of a table? Nope. Not that at least. I guess probably the only way to do this would be to put an actual HTML table. I don't know if I want to go through that kind of effort. Okay. Full screen. This full screen like that. Hide my image. Here we go. In this video, we will discuss what Feathers.js services are and what you can do with them in a Feathers.js application. Now, Feathers.js services are at the heart of every application. And in general, a service is just an object or an instance of a class that implements certain methods. And we'll talk about those certain methods. But typically, a service can be used to read or write data from a database, to interact with the file system, call another API, call other services like sending an email, processing a payment, returning the current weather, etc., etc. Services really can do anything. They just adhere to a particular interface. And I mentioned those methods. These service methods are CRUD methods that a service can implement. So that's create, read, update, and delete. And so here we see a basic class called myService, and it is implementing the service method. So we have find, get, create, update, patch, and remove. And now when you're implementing a custom service, you can implement these methods. Now you don't have to implement all of them, but you must implement at least one. And once you've implemented it, you can say app.use to actually register that service, to actually use it in your Feathers application. Now, the Feathers service itself is very general. It's just JavaScript code, and it describes in a general sense how to interact with your service. But the power of this is Feathers can actually expose this service over a REST API. So for a REST API, incoming requests will get mapped automatically to the corresponding service method. And that works like this. So for a given service.find method, that's going to be a GET request on the slash service name. So a GET request to slash messages is going to call service.find. You can also do some more advanced querying. So if you pass in a query, that would be the same as making a GET request on slash messages with the query string unread equals true, or any other properties you'd like to query on, and that's going to get passed into the find method. To get an individual item, that is a GET request on slash messages slash one, and that maps to the service.get method and passes in the given ID. In terms of methods that will modify entities, the create method gets In terms of methods that will modify entities, the create method gets mapped to a post request on slash messages. Update gets mapped to put request on slash messages slash ID. A patch will get matched. A patch will get matched to the match method on the path /messages/id, and a delete will get mapped to the remove method on /messages/1. So that's great. When you first saw the service interface, it would kind of make sense that those methods would map to those things. But the power of this is we can not only expose our service over REST, we can also expose it over sockets. And we do this through service events. Now, a registered service will automatically, oh no, go away, break timer. No, no. Now, a registered service will automatically become a node.js event emitter. So anytime one of these service methods that gets called that modifies data, like create, update, patch, or remove, an event will automatically be emitted that describes that particular event. And we can see how the given service methods map to a given event. So the create method maps to the created event, the update method maps to the updated event, the patch matches to patch, and the remove method matches up to the removed event. But again, the power of this is we can define our service in a very general way. And once we expose it over sockets, we now can have real-time updates because we get these messages whenever a certain event has occurred. Now, there are several database adapters that are built into Feathers.js core, and database adapters are just Feathers.js services that have already been implemented for you, so you don't have to do all of the hard work. And when you're typically getting started out with Feathers, you won't really have to create your services from scratch. So in terms of what's built into Feathers, you have an in-memory database with Feathers memory or Feathers NeedDB. You can have a local storage or an async storage database with Feathers local storage. You can have a file system database with Feathers NeedDB. That's what we're going to be using in this tutorial because it just uses a JSON file. You also have access to full database systems. So there's Feathers MongoDB and Feathers Mongoose, which you can use with a Mongo database. There's Feathers Connects, Feathers SQLize, and Feathers Objection, which you can use with all of these SQL databases. And there's also Feathers Elasticsearch. And now the interesting thing about this is these are essentially services that are already implemented. So you won't have to write the code that finds in your database or that deletes or removes in your database. All of that's been written for you. All you need to do is to point an adapter at a particular database table or a particular document store, and you instantly get a Feather service with all of those methods we talked about and all of those real-time events. Now let's go ahead and generate a Feathers service. I'll do some quick editing. Let's minus out of that. We'll go full screen here and minimize. Okay, so I am here in the Feathers directory that we generated earlier, and I'm going to generate a service. So I'll say Feathers generate service. And just like when generating an app, what? What? Oh, I'm not in the right directory. Okay. Do. Okay, so I'm currently in the directory that we generated our Feathers app in earlier, and this is where I'll run the generate service command. So I can say Feathers generate service, and this will ask me a few questions, just like it did when I initially generated the app. Now I can choose what kind of a service this is, and again, we have all of these built-in adapters. If you remember, when we generated the app, we chose NeedDB for authentication, so I think here it would make sense to use NeedDB for our messages service that we're about to create. But the interesting thing to note here is you can actually have multiple services that talk to multiple different databases, but we will choose NeedDB. For this service, we're going to call it messages. This is going to be in charge of keeping track of all the messages that get created, etc. It will be on the /messages path, and it will require authentication. So no users can send messages unless they are logged in. Awesome. So if we open this up in VS Code, we can take a look in the services directory, and we now see that there is a messages folder, and it looks very similar to our users folder, but it's specific to our messages service. So if we look at messages service, we can see it looks very familiar. It's bringing in the class here which is just an empty class that can be modified if you want to. And it's also bringing in the model class, which is in the models folder. So if we take a look at messages.model, we can see that it's neDB, but in this case, it's talking to messages.db instead of users.db. And that's pretty much it for creating a custom service. In the next video, I'll show you how to customize an existing service by overriding some of those built-in methods. Okay, next video, we are going to modify this service. Cool. In this video, we will modify the user service to override the create method to add some custom logic in that create method. So essentially what we're going to do is whenever a user is created, we're automatically going to add an avatar property to that user that is an avatar image. And we'll be using Gravatar for this. So the first thing we'll do is we'll bring in the crypto module. So crypto is built into node.js, so we don't have to install anything, we can just bring it in. And we'll be bringing this in because we want to make an MD5 hash of the user's email. So the Gravatar service works by passing it an MD5 hash of someone's email, and it will give you back their avatar URL, or avatar image. So what we'll do is we're going to override the create method of this service. So we can see that users extends service, and service is exported from Feather's neDB. So without overriding anything, we get the default behavior of a Feathers neDB service, where it interacts with the Feathers neDB database, and all is good there. But if we want to override a particular method to add some custom logic, we can do that here. And the method that I want to override is create. So we have create. It takes in the data. This is the data that's being sent to the server to create this user. And then we get params. This is any extra info like the query string or anything like that. And then we can do the work in here. So first thing I'll do is I will destructure some properties from our incoming data. So I'm going to grab off email, password, and for now I'll add GitHub ID. It doesn't exist yet, but later on when we add GitHub OAuth, we'll already have it pulled off and added to the user as well. The next thing we'll do is we'll generate that MD5 hash of the user's email. So we'll create a hash variable, and this is going to be equal to crypto.createHash of MD5. And we'll say update with the user's email to lowercase. And then we need to digest that hash, and we're going to grab it as a hex value. Awesome. So again, this just creates an MD5 hash of the user's email, because that's what we'll need to use when we send it off to grab the user's Gravatar URL. Now to actually create that URL, I'm going to create a variable called avatar. This will be equal to some Gravatar URL, which we'll create, slash that hash that we just created, and then we'll also have a query string that specifies the size of the image. So let's define a variable up here that is the Gravatar URL. And this is going to be equal to https://s.gravatar.com/avatar. And this is the URL that you should use when you're grabbing an avatar from Gravatar. So we'll have the URL, we'll have the hash that we generated, and then we also need a query. In this case, our query will be s equals 60, so the size of 60. Awesome. So now that we have this, we're actually going to create an object that is all of the user data that will be inserted into the database. So I'm going to create a variable called user data. This is an object. It has the email, their password, their GitHub ID, and their avatar. So now that I have the user information, I can continue creating this user. And because we overrode the create method of this neDB service, we now need to call the super method so that the user will actually get inserted into the database. So right at the bottom here, I'll do return super.create. I'll pass in that user data, and then I'll also forward on any params that were passed in. Now, what this does is it calls the create method of the built-in neDB service, and that handles all the logic of inserting it into the database. I've essentially just added some custom logic, which will add a new property before that user gets inserted into the database. So that's it for customizing a service. In the next video, we'll talk about hooks, and which will show you another way of customizing services. Instead of overriding a method within a given service, we can actually create custom functions, which will get called at different times in the service method lifecycle. See you there. Cool. So now we'll talk about hooks. Has anybody new joined? Hello, people. John is asking, Loopback or Nest.js for a pet project? Why not Feathers.js? Yeah. James is saying, so here, I'll show my face, because, but yeah, I mean, when I'm live streaming, I mean, I'll make mistakes, but I feel like I'm making more mistakes if I'm trying not to make mistakes, which is what's happening right now. Oh, AnyDB. NEDB? NEDB. It could be Topher. It could be. NedB. Hello, Greg. Welcome to the stream. But yeah, John, if you're thinking of using either of those, try Feathers.js first, because it does very similar things to both Loopback and Nest.js. I don't know. Let's now you got me thinking, Topher. Let's see if there's like a pronunciation on their website. NeDB? I really just want the GitHub repo. Yeah. Pronounce? No. Pronounce NeDB. Let's see if anybody has searched the web for this before. How do you pronounce NeDB? I pronounced it letter by letter as an acronym for Node Embedded Database, NEDB. That makes sense. My instinct was to pronounce it NeDB, so I think there's definitely an ambiguity there. NEDB. Huh. I feel like if I'm saying it wrong, I have to redo all of the videos, because I mentioned it in the intro video too, because when we were choosing our initial service. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you just say it how you want to say it. I'm not gonna worry about it. Where'd the chat go? Hey. John is saying sellout. I am not being paid for this. I'm not a sellout. It's a really cool framework. I mean, so Loopback is backed by like a very large company. Nest.js, you have to use TypeScript with it. Feathers, you have the option to use TypeScript or JavaScript. So I don't know. Use whatever you think will work. Salman is saying, what is the best framework for a billing application? I think think it as a Google Sheet with multiple lines of table to be submitted. I think it varies. I don't know if you're building like a full stack application, because then there are different problems there. So it's like, how are you? Maybe the question is, how do you show that billing information on the front end? And for that, maybe you would use a table plugin of sorts or something like that. In terms of actually charging money to people, I would use the third-party service. So like, there's what's it called? It's the one from PayPal. Braintree. Maybe it's not. PayPal Payments API. I feel like there was a, what's it called? Braintree? Maybe I'm thinking of something else. So it's definitely Stripe. That's one that I've used before. Hmm. 9 top 8 payment APIs to manage your stuffs. Okay, we have Stripe, Nudelio, never heard of it. I've heard of Square. Yes, PayPal. Aiden, Paybook, KeyPay, Bips. I don't know. Stripe is probably one of the biggest ones. You might go with that. But again, I don't know exactly what you're doing, so. And thanks, Topher. You got me thinking too, so but it's totally fine. It is Braintree. Greg is saying. Okay. They got bought by PayPal. the website just looked weird to me. Here, I didn't want to click it. Let's click it. Yeah, this is definitely it. Braintree, a PayPal service. Yeah. Second page of Google search. Cool. Okay, so our next video is on hooks. I think this, I do want to have like a visual reference. There was one that David showed when he was on the show. Let's see. Yeah, what's next? For the general design pattern, see this post. Yeah, I think either one of these posts has the image that I'm looking for on it. Bohan says, skipping your question. Did I? Oh, sorry. Have I heard for Backbone or Marionette, and how relevant are those libraries in modern web application? I have. I know that they're, I mean, any new projects probably aren't starting with them because they are a lot older. But let's take a look at them. I know like Backbone JS was really one of the first front-end frameworks of sorts because it was more than just jQuery. They actually implemented like templating logic and stuff like that. There are still websites today that still use Backbone because they were written a long time ago and they still work just fine. I think the only thing is there are newer things that you would use instead. In terms of relevancy, yeah, for new apps, probably not that relevant. But if you're looking to get a job somewhere and they have like a legacy code base that's written in this, then yeah, you'd probably need to know it. I've heard of Marionette, but never seen it. Let's take a look. Is it Marionette.js? The Backbone framework. Maybe this is what I was thinking of. So it's the combination of Backbone and Marionette. And this gives you like view logic and templating and stuff like that. You have like a class view. Yeah. So, and actually, like, if let's look at it on GitHub. Let's see if it's still maintained. I mean, look at that. It was. I mean, there was a commit to it in April. Yeah. They're still accepting pull requests. I mean, it was a few months ago, but for being an older framework, it's still maintained. Let's look at Backbone on GitHub. Yeah, last updated in February. So, I mean, it was at least updated within the past year. But again, most modern applications are going to choose like React or Vue or something like that rather than one of these. Hello, Felix. Welcome to the stream. Okay, so we're talking about hooks. We just talked about custom services. I know. Oh, you know what? Is this an image? This is not an image. I like this a lot better than what I showed in my slides. That looks cleaner. I don't know. Ooh, this image is awesome. Yeah, so separating RESTful services and the HTTP transport. So this is what we're talking about with Feather services. I kind of want to put this image in the slide deck. Yeah, and then just this shows how they're protocol independent. Cool. That's the image I was looking for. Is it in this one? Here it is. Okay. New slide deck. Books. Let's update our start script. We can't see the black text. We will create an image tag, and we'll give it a class of white image. We'll give it a white background, white border, all that good stuff. I'm using important because I want to override styles in this. Cool. Let's give it some padding. Very nice. So those are hooks. Yeah, you know, I think I want to re-record the services video. Really, so I can show these images. Cool. Yeah, let's grab both these images. So on the services slide, so we talk about what a service is, we show both of the methods, and then we can show these images. Is that what I call it, or I call it white image? Right here. Okay. And we'll do the same thing after the services slide, or the real-time events slide. Okay. Yeah, we're definitely going to redo this video, but let me see if there are any other images that I want to show in here, because this blog post is really good. So we have the services. I mean, what is this image? According to the patterns of enterprise application architecture, the service layer defines an application's boundary with a layer of services that establishes a set of available operations and coordinates the application's response in each operation. Here is the service layer. Cool. Yeah. I think that's all I want to show. Yeah, should be fine. Okay. Cool. Wait. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna do this one again. Infi says Discord didn't show the notification. I usually just do an @ here. So if you weren't online in Discord, you might not have received it. Yeah. Hello, Amy, who says, how's the new logo going? I think it's going okay. I think it's confused some people. They didn't know where they were because I do have a new logo. But yeah, cool. All right, here we go. Excuse me. Yeah. In this video, we will discuss Feathers services. Now, Feathers JS services are at the heart of every Feathers application. And in general, they are just an object or an instance of a class that implements certain methods. And with this uniform protocol can do many different things. So they can read or write from a database, interact with the file system, call another API, call other services like sending email or payments or checking for the weather. They can really do anything. They just adhere to a particular interface. And this interface maps very well to CRUD methods. So create, read, update, and delete. And so for any given service, they can expose these methods. There's find, get, create, update, patch, and remove. And you don't have to implement all of these, but you must implement at least one. And now this is a very generic way of describing something, but each of these methods can do anything they want. In the case of interacting with the database, they would do exactly what they say that they're doing: find, get, create, update, patch, remove, etc. And then once you have a service, you can register it with app.use. Now, services can be exposed in various ways. So you can define your service with JavaScript code. It's really just methods. You're not really caring about is it HTTP or is it sockets. You're really just defining how does the service work. And then if you did want to expose this service as a REST API, all of those methods that we just showed will be exposed to a particular REST API method and URL. So all of our get, or all of our methods that don't modify anything, would use the HTTP verb get, and the service.find method would map to the /messages route. And service.find with a more complicated query would map to the /messages route with a query string. And service.get for a particular ID would match to /messages or / the service name / a given ID. Now, for methods that modify things, we would use the standard HTTP methods. So for creating, we would use a post request on /service name. For updating, it would be a put request on /service name / ID. And for patch, it would be a patch on /service name / ID. And for delete, would be a /. And for delete, it would be a delete. And for delete, that would go to /messages / ID as well. And we can see that all of these RESTful methods and paths match to a given service method, which we would have created. And that ends up creating something like this. So you have your service layer, which is very generic. We just implement those methods, and that's what our code base looks like. But then once we enable the REST protocol or the REST handler, now clients can interact with our service over a RESTful API. Now, every service... Now, every service automatically becomes a node.js event emitter. So when any one of the service methods are called that would either modify, update, or delete something within that service, these events are going to get called. And again, all of the service methods equally map over to a given event. So service.create will fire the created event, service.update will fire the updated event, service.patch will fire the patched event, and service.remove will fire the removed event. Now, just in general, it's firing off these events, but once we enable the socket protocol, we can now see how this exact same service, which we were interacting with over REST, can now be interacted with over sockets. Excuse me. can now be interacted with over sockets. And visually, this is what this would look like. So again, we have our very generic service layer, which is really just application code for interacting with that service. But then once we enable the REST protocol, that service can be accessed over REST. And if we enable the socket protocol, that same service can be accessed, and that same service can be accessed over WebSockets. This diagram is wrong. It says WebSockets for the REST handler and HTTP for the WebSocket handler. Man. Oh, well, I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to redo this slide. And so what that means is all of our services exist in our application, and they're very generic in that they just implement certain methods. But by simply adding a given REST or socket protocol, now clients can interact with those services either using REST or sockets, which is really great. Now, need to disable my timer. Now, Feathers comes with many different database adapters, and database adapters are essentially just services that have been implemented for you. So instead of having to do all the hard work of implementing like find and get and create and update for a given database, these database adapters do all of that for you out of the box. Now, built into Feathers are certain adapters for working with in-memory databases, for working with browser storage like local storage, or if you're on React Native, something like async storage. You can also use adapters that would work with the file system, like Feathers NeedDB. And of course, there's support for more full-fledged database systems. So there's Feathers MongoDB and Feathers Mongoose for interacting with MongoDB. There's Feathers Connects, Feathers SQLize, Feathers Objection for interacting with all of these SQL databases, and there's Feathers Elasticsearch. And now all of these adapters implement all of those service methods which we've talked about, which essentially give you an instant CRUD API to any one of these databases. Now we're going to generate a Feather service. This is the command we'll use to do that. And then I will edit it in there and cut it. Man, that was a lot of mess ups, but we'll edit it. Pro editing. Yeah. Okay. We are working on hooks now. I think I'm going to show that image, which is a good image. Yeah. And I think for this, I'll put in an example of a hook. I'm back. Even more pro editing, yeah. Yeah. I'll put these code samples in. When I was first going through this guide, it wasn't clear if I was actually supposed to add these hooks to my application or were they just examples? And it turns out they are just examples. So I think it'll be good for this guide that I don't actually implement these in my code. I can just show them in the slides, and then we're actually going to implement some in the code. Cool. I think for this, maybe I can come over to the browser. Yeah, I think I'll switch to the browser to this particular spot, and then I can scroll and kind of talk about it at the same time. That's what I'll do. Hooks. Cool. Yeah. Okay. here we go. In the examples, see the context. I don't know if anyone that was tuning in yesterday who remembers about closures, but this is an example of a closure. We have a function which returns a function, but then that inner function still has access to that parameter. It's a closure. Cool. And then from there, I'm going to jump over to talking about the context and the different things that are on it. And I mean, I guess I think I'll show this. I'll show this, and then we'll show the code for generating a hook. Cool. Okay. In this video, we'll learn about hooks in Feathers.js. Now, we saw in the last video that services are a really great way to implement data storage and communicate with a database or data modification. And technically, we could just use services for our entire application. But sometimes we want some... But sometimes we have similar functionality that we want to use throughout our application, and this is where hooks can come in. I'm gonna have to start over. Cool. In this video, we'll learn about hooks. Now, in the last video, we saw that Feathers.js services can be used to implement data storage, data modification, essentially interact with all types of things. And if we wanted to, we could build our whole application with services. However, there are certain things that we need to reuse throughout our application, and it wouldn't make sense to just implement in one service. And this is where hooks can come into play. Now, hooks are small middleware functions that can be executed before, after, or on error of any given service method. So the way to think about this is for any given service method, we can have various hooks that will get called along the way. So for the find method of this given service, we can first call our hook that to make sure that they're logged in, and then we can call another hook to make sure that they're an admin, and if both of those are satisfied, we'll allow them to search in the database. And then we can also have after hooks. So if you're ever... We can also have after hooks. So if you have something like a user service where you want to remove the user's passwords from the user entity before returning it to the client, you can have a hook that automatically removes certain fields from the outgoing data. And as I mentioned, these hooks are reusable. So they're just small functions. So instead of having to write that code over and over again, we can define one hook and then bring it in and use it in multiple service methods in multiple different hooks. Now, to see an example of that, here we just have a basic hook called created@. Now, you'll see that the hook gets access to the context. We'll talk more about the context in a second. But particularly, the thing that we care about in methods like create or update is data. So data on the context is the actual thing that we'll be either creating or updating. And so in the case of create, we can add a created app property on data, set it to the current date, and then we'll return the context. And what this will do is any data that passes through this hook is going to get a new property on it called created app. And now, for instance, in our messages service, we could register this hook in the before create. And now before any message is created, it's automatically going to add that created at date to it. Now, you'll see as you start to write hooks that these things are actually very reusable, and we can technically reuse this hook, but actually modify a different property name depending on where that hook was run. So we can see it's pretty much the same hook here, but it now is a function which you can invoke with a particular property name that you'd like to set. And it's just setting the current date on that property name. So now we can reuse this hook for created app, just like before. So when a particular message is created, we'll set the created at method. And we also have our updated at. So whenever a message is updated, we'll set the updated at property on that given message. So you can see here, how context, so you can see here how hooks are very reusable, and once you've defined them, you can use them in many different ways, and they become actually very useful. Now, let's talk a bit more about this context object. Now, context has quite a few properties on it. Some of them are read-only and some of them are writable. In terms of read-only properties, you have access to app. This is our Feathers application. So once you say context.app, you have access to all of your Feathers application, including .services, .get, etc. You can do context.service to access a particular service within your application. Context.path, which is the name of the service. Context.method to see what type of method is being called. Is it the find one or the find all? And the hook type. So is it before, after, or on error? Now, this becomes very powerful because within hooks, you can call other services. You can have a hook that does something custom based on the path or based on the method. And so all of these things are very useful from within a hook. There are writable properties, and this is how you would actually modify an outgoing request or an incoming data in terms of create or update. Context.params is going to include the query. So this is anything that was on the query string for a RESTful request. It'll also include provider. So if you want to do something specific, if this data is coming across on a particular transport, you can check that property. You have context.id if you're accessing one individual item with the get, remove, or the update method. We showed in our example context.data is the actual data that was sent by the user when they're either creating, updating, or patching a given item. You have context.error, so you can actually throw an error. And context.result will be the result that actually gets sent back to the client. And this you have access to in any of the after hooks. Now, we will generate a basic hook inside of our app to see how all of this works. I thought I had a slide for that. No, I don't. Okay. So here we can see we have access to many different things inside of our hooks, which actually allows us to create very powerful hooks, which can do pretty much anything we would want them to. Now, as I mentioned, these hooks can be registered in many different places. So typically within the generated application, you'll see for any given service, the before, the after, and the error that you can tap into. So for any given method name, you can specify your hooks in here, and those hooks will get called when any one of these methods are called. Now, let's go ahead and generate a hook so we can see how all of this works. Okay, minimize this. Do I have VS Code open? Cool. Okay, so now we will generate a hook. And you, of course, can write this hook yourself, but the feathers generator comes built in with a generate hook command, and it just makes things a little bit easier and puts the hooks in a more consistent place. So here I'll say feathers generate hooks. Not that. Feathers generate hook. Okay, start over. Okay, now we will generate a hook using the feathers generator. Now you could, of course, create these hooks yourself. They're simply functions that will get called and you can import them in. But the feathers generator is very convenient in that it puts all of your hooks in one. It puts all of your hooks in the same place and makes things more consistent. So I'm going to say feathers generate hook. We can then name our hook. Now we are going to create a hook called process message. And essentially what we're going to do is some data validation. So any message that comes into our service or into our app, we're going to let's try that again. Now for this hook, we're going to call it process message. And so we're going to create a simple hook that looks at the incoming data whenever a user is creating a message and then does some validation. It'll make sure that it has a text property. It'll make sure that it is of a particular length. And then it will also automatically add a created at timestamp on it. So let's call it process message. What kind of a hook should it be? In this case, we're going to do a before hook because we want to call this hook before a message is created. And what kind of... And what services should this hook be? And what services should this hook be for? Now we could set this as application wide, and that means it would be called before a particular method throughout our application. Now we don't want that. We just want it to be a before hook in messages. So I'll select that. And then what methods should this hook be for? In this case, I just want it for the create method. If I hit enter, we can see that it generated the process message hook in the hooks directory, and then it updated messages.hooks to actually use that hook. So let's take a look. If we look now in the hooks directory, we can see here's our process message hook. It's totally empty. And totally basic. It just returns the context for now. And if we look in our services and we look at messages, we can see that the process message hook automatically got required in, and it automatically got added there on the create method. So the process message hook will get called before any message is created. Now let's go ahead and add our custom logic. First thing we'll do is we will destructure data from the context. And remember, data is the incoming data, particularly for this hook because it is a before create hook. So this is the data that the client is sending to the server. Now, first we'll do some basic validation, and we'll just say if there is no text property on the data, we're going to throw an error. We'll say a message must have text. And this is another thing to note about hooks. If a hook throws an error, it will instantly stop. Any other hooks that we're going to get called afterwards won't get called, and it will actually return this error to the client. So this is one way of just immediately jumping out of a hook when something has happened. So after we've done that validation, if the error doesn't get thrown, we also want to make sure that the text is of a particular length. And we're also going to add the user ID of the user that created that message to the incoming message. So first thing we'll do is destructure the user from the params. So we'll say context.params. And particularly the way authentication works is because we have auth set up, all requests from a given incoming all incoming requests that are authorized will actually have user data on the params object. So we have the user, and then we'll do our text validation. So we'll say text equals data.text.substring, and we're just going to make sure that it's no longer than 400 characters long. And so this will essentially just, if it was longer than 400 characters, it'll just chop off the rest, and this is all that we're going to be putting in our database. Now, the last thing we'll do is we'll overwrite context.data. So if you remember, data, context.data is the thing that the client sent us. And by overwriting it, we're going to be overwriting what actually will get inserted into the database. So here I'll say context.data. We're going to pass in this updated text property. So that's the truncated text. We're going to create a user ID property, and that's going to be equal to user._ID. And we'll also create a created at property, and that's just going to be equal to a new date, and we'll get the current time. Awesome. Now I mentioned it, but the reason we're adding the user ID here is so that we can that way we can associate a particular message with the user that created it. And by putting the user ID here on the server side, there's no way that a client could attempt to create a message that belongs to some other user. They can only create messages that belong to them. Now, that's all we need to do in this hook. And of course, at the bottom of every hook, you need to return the context. And because this is a before create hook, before a message is created, all of these things will be checked, all of these things will be updated, and ultimately, this is what's going to get inserted into the database when a new message is created. Now, let's actually create another hook. So we'll create a hook for the outgoing messages. So anytime we request messages from our server, we want to automatically populate the user data. So we'll go back to the terminal and generate another hook. In this case, we'll call it populate user. We want this to be an after hook because this should get called after we have retrieved messages from the database. And in this case, we're going to do messages again. And we want to do after all. So after any one of these methods are called, we're actually going to populate the user information. Awesome. And if we take a look at messages.hooks, we can see that it automatically got added here after all, and it's bringing it in from the hooks directory. And if we look in the hooks directory, we now have another hook called populate user. And now, as I mentioned, what we're going to do in here is for any outgoing message, we will automatically put the user data onto that message because when a message was created, we did add the user ID. So we can use the user ID to request the given user from the user service and attach it to every single outgoing message. So first thing we'll do is destructure all of the things that we'll need from the context. So we'll grab the app, we'll grab the method, result, and params, all from context. And then we'll create an add user function. So essentially this function will take in a message. So we'll say async message. We're going to take in the message. And then what we need to do is query the user service for the user of the given message, and then we'll attach it. So I'll say user is going to be await app.service users.get, and we want to pass in the ID for the given user, and that comes from message.userid. And then we'll forward any params that were passed in the request, and that should give us back the user. And now what we'll do here is we're going to return the message spread, so it'll have all of the properties of the message, including the user. So now we've essentially just attached a user property to that message. Now we'll have some custom logic to figure out what type of a hook we're in. So if this is a find hook, then that means we actually have multiple messages that we need to attach the user to. But if it's just one, we only need to attach the user to one message. So we'll say if method is equal to find, then we'll need to override the data in the resulting context. So we'll say result.data equals await promise.all, and we're going to pass in result.data.map add user. So if this was a find method, result.data is going to be an array of all of the messages, and we essentially want to map over each message and add the user object to that message. Awesome. Now, the other case is if the method is just searching for one particular message. So it's not a find all, it's just like a get. So in this case, we'll say context.result equals await add user with result. So if you remember, result is the outgoing data. And so in the case of just a get, that's going to be just one single message. And so here we're just passing in one message, which will add the user information to it. We can see this is complaining about a possible race condition. I know that we are using async await, and there isn't really a race condition, so I'm actually just going to add an ESLint ignore up at the top here. Awesome. And so that's it for the populate user hook. Now, again, what this will do is anytime there's outgoing messages, so a client has requested all of the messages from the server, or a message was just created and we're sending that out to all of our socket connections. Essentially what we'll do is we're going to add the user property to the message, so that way when we're viewing the messages on the front end, we instantly have all of the user information for that given message. Cool. I think I'm going to include it in this same video, but there's another section down here on when should you extend versus when should you yeah, actually I won't do that. We'll jump to the code. So that's it for creating this hook. And now you might be wondering, there are multiple ways of doing the things that we've done. So if you think back to when we modified our users service, so if we look at the users class, we actually overwrote the create method. Now, if you think about this, this actually could have just been a before create hook, right? We could have had all of this code right here in a before create hook. And so really, when you're thinking about, should I override a service method or should I write a hook? It really comes down to, is this logic particular to a given service? So in this case, we think that the logic is particular to the service because it's not really anyone else's responsibility to add the avatar to the user. So we're going to leave that responsibility with the service. And in the case of hooks, these are potentially things that can be reused often. So anytime we know that we're going to do something more than once and we don't want to duplicate the code, that's definitely good to put it in a hook there instead. The other question you might have is, when do you create a custom service? So far in our application, we have no custom services. We have the user service, which is just using an EDB service. We have one overridden method, but it's not very custom. And then we have a messages service, which again is just using the built-in EDB service. So really, you should only create custom services if you need to deal with external APIs. Potentially, you want to combine multiple services together. For example, if you're doing like reports or something like that. Or again, if the service doesn't talk to a database and it only talks to an API, that might be when you create a custom service. But for the most part, and for this application, we're just using built-in services, and we have a couple of custom hooks. All right, in the next video, we are going to add GitHub authentication. See you there. Hello. I think James mentioned it earlier, but I mess up so much when I'm trying to get it right. There it is. Cool. Thank you, Amy and Carlos. Envy is saying, I see your VS Code has the Java extension pack. Do I code in Java? How did you see that? Is it one of these? Oh, because of Maven projects? I might have been working on like Android at some point. That's probably why that's in there. I mean, I coded in Java a long time ago. So my first programming language, like in college, was Java. And I've done like a very little Android development, but I have messed around with Java on there. That's probably why I had it. And when I was teaching at Galvanize, we would do a computer science week. And when we did that, we would teach object-oriented programming and I would teach students Java. So that's probably why that's installed. I haven't used it in a long time, though. Eddie is saying, imagine if doing all your tutorial videos took as much effort as these feathers videos. It's really just because I'm trying to make them look polished. Most of my tutorial videos, we're hanging out. It's okay if we make mistakes. I mean, honestly, I feel like it's easier because I'm here. Like, you can see me, and in those I'm not. I don't know. But again, I'm trying to make them look as professional as possible. Hello, Adam. Welcome to the stream. Who says, what a great new logo. I appreciate that. Bougie says, thank you, CJ. You are such a wonderful human being. Thank you. Bougie is saying, if possible, could you please show expiring tokens and using refresh tokens to get the new token? Forgot password and reset password for authentication management using feathers. That would potentially need to come towards the end. I believe they have that in the cookbook. That might have been where you got it from. Let's take a look. Authentication. Forgot password. I feel like they mention it somewhere, like in the docs or the API, about like there might be an external package that helps you implement that. Yeah, Feathers authentication management. Sign up verification, forgot password reset, other capabilities. So this is actually a separate package. It might just be a collection of hooks that you can add to your app. Let's see. Here's a step-by-step guide. Oh. Okay. This is where they're actually bringing in that service, or that hook. Yeah, and so I mean, I guess essentially, if you're doing like email verification, it's a custom service that will like send an email when a user is created, etc. Yeah, we might not do that today, but I think it's a great extension of this tutorial in general to show like how do you make it more like production level. Yeah, cool. Um, yeah, so this next thing we're going to demonstrate with Postman. Let me pull up Postman. So I can close that. Close that. Cool. This should be fine. I think like that's the thing about this guide is it has you write so much code without actually running your code. So like I made a typo. And here. This should not be there. Do I need to re-record that part? I'm gonna leave it for now. I'll watch the replay and decide if I need to record it. Maybe I can add like a blur on the semicolon so it's not there. Cool. I think I can full screen that, and then I can go like this. That's what I'll do. Okay. In this video, we'll demonstrate logging in with a user in the existing... That's not a good intro. What am I going to say here? Ooh. So we now have a fully functioning chat application that consists of services and hooks. And in this video, we'll show how we can actually create a user. Now, we don't have a front end yet, but for this, we'll just use Postman. Now, I currently have our Feathers app running as a dev server on port 3030. And so if I open up Postman, I can make a request to it. And what I'm going to do is make a request against /users to create a new user. So this needs to be a post request. And then we'll go against http:// localhost 3030/users. Now the body of the request will be the actual user that I'm creating. So here I'll click raw and then I'll select application JSON. And then I'm going to send a JSON object that is the user that I want to create. In this case, the email will be hello@feathersjs.com. And our password will be super secret. And click send. Now this will make a post request to that service. Our before create hook will run, which creates the avatar, and then it will insert it into the database. And we can now see that this user was created. So they have that email, they have the avatar, which was automatically generated based on the create code that we wrote, and it has an ID which represents it in the database. So now that we have a registered user, we can get a token from the authentication service. So here I'm going to make a post request to http:// localhost 3030/authentication. And the body of the request will be very similar. I want it to be raw, and this should be application JSON. And so I'll copy the body, but we do need to add one extra property because we need to tell it the type of login that we're doing. In this case, we have the strategy, and we're going to set it equal to local. And this is to differentiate between our different authorization strategies. So there's local auth, which is just username and password. There's also OAuth, which would be any service like GitHub or Facebook or Google. So we're saying that we're using the local strategy, we're passing our credentials, and we should get back a token. So we're going to make a request. And there we go. We get back an access token, which means that our login worked. Now, subsequent requests to the service or any of the services in our app would need to include this token. And now let's actually take a look at that. So if I were to try to make a request against our messages service, let's say I just want to get all existing messages. Right now, I am not authorized because I'm not sending that token. But if I take the token that was generated after the login, and in this request, I can set an authorization header. So here I'm going to say authorization, and the value is going to be bearer space, and then that token value. And now if I send the request, I have a malformed JWT. Let's actually make sure that we did this correctly. Oh, I didn't copy the whole thing. Copy the whole thing. Try again. And now if we try, there we go. So now that we are a valid user and we're logged in, it actually lets us make a request to the service. And right now there are no messages, so it just comes back as an empty array. So in the next video, we'll actually build a client application, which will make all of these requests. So we won't have to be using Postman to interact with our application. We'll have a client-side application where the user can log in, they can create messages and view messages. See you there. Cool. Yeah. I think I saw this last time when I was going through the docs, like the it has us create a client application, but it's not the full client application. And then we end up creating the full application in the next section. Okay. Yeah, I think I am going to do that. Hello, Gabriel. Welcome to the stream. Gabriel is asking, when will these tutorial videos be released? Probably within a week or so, maybe less. It shouldn't take too long to edit. I think I'm doing an okay enough job, not requiring. Actually, there's a ton of splice, but within a week or so. Hello, Omar, who says, I have a coding challenge soon with arrays and recurrence, or is it recursion? That's cool. Are you practicing? Yeah, let me know. Do you mean recursion or is it recurrence? I don't know what recurrence is. Is that the same thing? Yeah, let me know if you mean recursion, because I think that's what you mean. Recursion is where a function calls itself. Let me know. But if you check out CG-videos, this is all of my YouTube videos, and if you search for recursion, I did do an episode a while back where I just talked about the basics of recursion. So talk about the concepts, we implement a basic function without recursion, and then we implement it with recursion. And I have all of the code examples on GitHub too. Oh, in French it's recurrence, I see. So this doesn't go very in depth, but it does kind of just try to get the basic concepts in. And I also show how to debug a JavaScript program to actually see the recursive call stack. So you can see how every time a function is called, it gets pushed onto the stack, and then as it makes its way out, those get popped off the stack. So you can take a look at that. It's probably not the best resource, but it might help a little bit. Okay, the next thing is we are going to build the front end application. Okay, let me get prepared. I'm gonna need the CDN links. Let's just create a new file. So I'm gonna need these. And I'll need the JavaScripts. It's interesting though, because in the earlier tutorials, Socket.io was brought in from a CDN, but now it's just being brought in from the server. Don't know how I feel about that. Yeah, it's super interesting. By default, it serves up the Socket.io client. Cool. Bougie is saying, yeah, in the old version of Feathers, they were using Passport. They're now using something else called Grant. And they're saying they didn't cover the refresh token part. Yeah, it does seem like with the latest version of Feathers, it's kind of they're more pushing you off to the grant documentation, because that's really how all this stuff is implemented. So if you need to do anything custom, typically it'll be with the configuration of grant. But we can try to talk about that. Impy says that I missed some messages. Let's see. I don't know if I did earlier than this. Let's see. I am in live chat. Okay. We talked about Java. Talked to those people. Oh, but maybe this is the one that I missed. For the older version, we have authentication management, but I doubt this will work for the new version. Yeah, because I mean that package that I looked at a second ago did seem like it wasn't updated in a while, so it may not be actually for Feathers v4. Oh, I guess I missed this one too. Do I have any recommendations for SQL learning stuff? I've only used NoSQL to this point, but everyone uses SQL, so I want to look into that, but I can't find any good resource. Just in terms of learning the SQL language, there's this thing called SQL Zoo. It's totally free and online, and there's just a series of exercises that walk you through the basics of SQL syntax, and you're actually just querying against, I believe it's like a yeah, a zoo database. And you can write your SQL statements here, and then you'll actually see the result on the right hand side. And so this is really cool for just learning the basics, the syntax and stuff like that of SQL statements. Um, what else? Yeah, I believe there is a Stack Overflow used to have a way of interacting with their data, like with SQL statements. Yeah, I mean, if I if I search for Stack Overflow SQL, it's going to try to find me answers to questions. Here we go. Query Stack Overflow. Yeah, this is also interesting. The Stack Exchange Data Explorer. So this is data across all of the Stack Exchange websites, and you can actually use SQL queries to query that data. So you can practice doing joins and queries and stuff like that. So that's a place to practice. SQL Zoo is a totally free place to learn. I feel like there was one other thing I used to recommend. I've never seen SQL Bolt, but it looks very similar to like SQL Zoo, where you can actually, yeah, you can actually write your queries. Check this out. Let's take a stretch. I'm gonna actually take a 5-minute break because I haven't taken a break yet. Check this out. It looks decent enough. I mean, I think anything where you can just practice basic SQL queries and these particular exercises have the correct answer as well, so you can see if you're on the right track. Yeah, check that out. Mike is back. Hello, Mike. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for the super chat. Yeah, I built a thing on stream a while back that would let me see the messages one at a time, and they wouldn't disappear until I acknowledge them. And instead of me having to do this whole like scroll thing, the only thing is I never updated it to have the latest live chat ID. Let's see if I can find that video. Yeah, build a YouTube live chat manager. Let's just look at it really quick because it was nice. It was a nice thing. Should pop up. Yeah, so it's like new incoming messages would pop up on the left-hand side, and they would always stay in the right order. Wait, I thought I paused it. And then if I acknowledge them, then they become acknowledged on the right-hand side. But that way I don't have to like scroll, and I can like go away from the chat when I come back to it to pick up right where I left off. But I never updated it to be dynamic. Essentially, I had to go in and change the live ID that it used for the API calls every time. I don't know. I should probably update it. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna take a 5-minute break, and then I will come back to build the client login and add Google OAuth. See you all soon. All right, I'm back. Thanks again to Mike for the €2 super chat. And welcome, Mike. So where we were, we just called the API with Postman. Now we're going to build a simple front end. So let's get that going. Yeah, I guess I'll hide this. That'll be ready to go. We can close Postman. Let's close this. Full screen that. Cool. Awesome. We have that. There's this. Okay. Think I'm ready. Here we go. What do I want to show? This. In this video, we will build a simple client that will authenticate with our Feathers service. Now, for this, we're actually going to be using the Feathers client-side library. There's some loud noises in the background. Okay, let's try again. In this video, we will build a client to communicate with our Feathers backend. And so in the last video, we saw how to use Postman to create a user and log in. And there were quite a few steps involved, but with the Feathers client library, there are actually built-in methods for authenticating, so it won't be as much work. Now, in our public directory, I'm actually going to override this index.html file. Let's create just a basic HTML file. We'll call it Feathers Chat. And then I need to bring in some CDN links. So there are some basic styles that I'm going to bring in so we won't have to worry about styling on our own. And I'll just pull these in at the bottom of the head. And then there are also some CDNs, some JavaScript CDNs that we need to bring in. So we're going to be bringing in the moment library for formatting dates. We'll bring in the Feathers client library, and then we'll bring the socket.io library so we can have real-time communication with the server. So I'll bring these script tags here at the bottom of the body. Awesome. So here inside of the body, I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to give it an ID of app. And so we're going to be writing JavaScript for all of this, and essentially JavaScript is going to handle showing the login page or showing the messages page, and all of that HTML is going to get dynamically inserted into this div. We'll go ahead and give it a class. We'll call it flex and flex column. And these are just built-in classes that come from those CSS files that we brought in. Now, here at the bottom, we're also going to bring in our own custom script tag. So let's bring in a script, and we'll say the source is going to be app.js. And now I need to define my app.js. So in the public directory, we'll create a new file, call it app.js. And inside of here, first thing we'll do is create a socket.io instance. So we'll say const socket equals io. And io is provided for us by the socket client library that we brought in. And then we'll create a Feathers client application. And so I'll say const client equals Feathers. And you'll notice this is actually the exact same way we would do it on the back end, but now we're just in front end code. And so we create a Feathers application like so. We now need to configure that client to communicate over sockets. So we'll say client.configure. We'll pass in feathers.socket.io, and then we'll pass in our socket that we created up top. And this now enables our Feathers application to communicate over sockets with our backend Feathers app. The next thing we'll do is we'll configure authentication. So here I'll just say client.configure. We'll say feathers.authentication. And we need to give it some options. In this case, we're just going to say storage is window.local storage. And that essentially tells the client library, the authentication, and that essentially tells the authentication client library to use local storage to store our JSON Web Token. Now let's create a basic login method, which will actually attempt to log in to our Feathers app. So we'll create a function, we'll call it login. This is going to be an async function. And then inside of here, we will Inside of here, we'll actually authenticate with the app. So I'm going to wrap this code in a try catch, because the first thing we're going to try to do is re-authenticate the user. So when a user logs in with the authentication client, it automatically stores their token in the browser. And if they come back to this page, if we try to re-authenticate them and they already have a token in the browser, they can be re-authenticated just fine. So to do that, we'll say return await client.re-authenticate. So if there was already a token in the browser, this will just automatically log them in. If that fails, then that means there wasn't a token in the browser, so now we can actually try to log them in. And for now, I'm just going to hard code my information, but in a future video, we'll actually build the client-side form where a user can enter in their username and password. But for now, we'll just do client.authenticate. And we'll pass in an object, and this is going to be that same object that we sent in Postman. So we need the strategy. This is going to be local. We'll pass in our email, which we created a user, and the email was hello@feathersjs.com. And the password was super secret. Awesome. Now we'll create a main method, which will actually call our login method. So we'll create a function called main, and this too will be an async function. And we'll say const auth equals await login. And so if the login was successful, we'll get back the user information in this auth variable, and we can go ahead and log that out to the console. So I'll say user is authenticated, and we'll pass in auth. And let's just see that happen. And to get all this code to run, we need to invoke the main function. So if I go to my browser and I refresh the page, well, actually, let's open up the DevTools, because when I refresh the page, we shouldn't see anything here, but on the right-hand side, we do see user is authenticated. Now, again, that's just using this hard-coded information, but in a future video, we'll create a form where the user can enter their information in. But we can see we get back all that same information that we saw when we were trying out the service with Postman. And you can see actually how easy this is. So we don't have to worry about using something like Axios or Fetch. We can just use this library and it automatically handles communicating with our backend service, mainly because of line 4 where we set it up to communicate over sockets. So that's it for just the basic client demonstration. In the next video, we'll set up Google OAuth so you can actually log in with Google as well. Cool. Yeah, I mean, the guide does say log out right here. I don't know if I want to add that. Maybe I can splice it in. Yeah, I'll try to splice it in. So the last thing we'll do is log the user out. And there is a built-in method for doing that. So we'll just say await client.logout. And if you remember, client is an instance of our Feathers application, and the login method is built in. So when we call that, it will actually remove the token from the browser. And so now if I refresh the page, we see they're authenticated, but at the same time, it actually removed the token, so they're no longer authenticated, just to demonstrate that we can log out. Now, in the next video, we will demonstrate adding Google OAuth to our application so users can actually log in with Google as well. See you there. Hello. Andrew is asking, can I do a logarithmic frequency scale spectrum in P5.js? I don't really know what that is. This is definitely more Daniel Schiffman coding train territory, but let's just look it up. Sounds interesting. Logarithmic frequency scale spectrum. Oh, I missed the letter L. Oh. Logarithmic? Interesting. Yeah. I actually don't know P5.js very much, but yeah. Hello, Anne. Anne says, good evening. I'm currently trying to wrap my head around fast join, which comes from Feathers Plus, making me painfully aware just how much I need to level up my skills. Let's check it out. I'm curious what that does. Feathers Plus. Is that one of the common hooks? Let's see. Yeah, so it is a hook. Join related records. It's very fast. Fast join is preferred over populate. Okay, so I guess it's a hook way of implementing join on some other entity. Interesting. So you have your resolvers, the query, and then the join itself. Cool. Yeah, it seems like it has a lot going on, but it seems pretty useful. Good luck with that, Anne. Okay. This next video, we're going to add Google OAuth. Let's leave that there. Can close these. Cool. And I just need to bring up the new application on GitHub. Hide my screen for a second. Let me grab the link. I'll let you see my screen for now. Oh, cool. Yeah, so I think, well, I'll click the link from the guide and then fill out the form. Where's my break timer? In this video, we will add GitHub OAuth to our Feathers.js application. Now, our application so far has local authentication, meaning users can sign up and log in with an email and a password, but it's usually convenient to give users the option to click a button like log in with GitHub. And so we'll do that here. So if we click this link, we get redirected to the new OAuth application form on the GitHub website, and we can fill in all of our details. So for this, I'll say Feathers chat tutorial. For homepage URL, we can just specify localhost. I'll do http://localhost 3030. For application description, I'll just say Feathers chat. And then we need a callback URL. So this is going to be localhost 3030/OAuth/GitHub/callback. Now, when we enable the GitHub OAuth, this is the default callback. We can modify it if we wanted to, but it is good to just leave it as the defaults. So once you click register application, that will give you your client ID and secret, and then we can update our configuration file with that client ID and secret. All right, I'm gonna hide my screen so you all don't steal my application. Actually, I think it'll be okay to show because I'll just delete it afterwards. Yeah, I'm just gonna delete it. So if we click register application, this will generate a client ID and secret, and that's what we will use in our Feathers application. So let's click register. And we can see here that we have an ID and a secret. Now I can take this ID value, and if we go to our application, we go into the config folder and then into our default.json. Here is where I can specify some options for OAuth. Now, so under authentication, I can add a new property called OAuth. This will be an object. And inside of here, I will add GitHub. And this is where I can specify my client ID and secret. So the client ID is the key in here. And so I'll just put my key in there. And then the client secret is the secret. Now, it's important to note here that these options are actually options for the Grant OAuth package. So if you take a look at the Grant documentation, you can see other options that you can provide here. But essentially, this is going to be forwarded on to the Grant underlying Grant application or underlying Grant library. We'll also add a redirect property here. And this essentially tells the OAuth service where to redirect to after a successful login. And so in our case, after a successful login, we want to redirect them back to the home page so that they can use our application. Cool. Now that we've set up the configuration, if we go into the source directory and take a look at the authentication file, here is where we'll need to add in our custom GitHub OAuth. So first thing I'll do is create a strategy. So I'm going to say class GitHub strategy extends the OAuth strategy. And the OAuth strategy is going to come from the OAuth package. And so let's capitalize that A, and then let's bring this in from the OAuth package as well. Now, there are lots of methods in here, but the particular one that we want to override is the get entity data method. And this is going to allow us to set the email for the incoming user. So I'll say const base data equals await super.getEntityData. And so this is going to call the built-in, this all needs to be inside of a method, getEntityData, that gives us access to the profile. We'll then call super.getEntityData with that profile. So the built-in OAuth strategy will do what it needs to do. Profile. I'm going to re-record this. Too many typos. Okay, here we go. Let's minimize all this. Cool. So after we've specified our configuration, we can go into the source directory, click on authentication, and this is where we will configure our GitHub OAuth. So the first thing we'll do is we'll bring in the OAuth strategy from this authentication OAuth package. And then we need to create our own class, which extends the OAuth strategy. So I'll say class GitHub strategy extends OAuth strategy. And in here, there are several methods that we could override. In this case, we're just going to override the getEntityData method. So I'll say async getEntityData. This takes in the profile. And we'll first call the getEntityData of the superclass. So we'll say await super.getEntityData, and we'll pass in the profile. But then after this is complete, the thing that we will actually return will include the user's email. Because when a user is signing up with GitHub, we still want to register their email in our system so that they can have the Gravatar URL that we set up earlier. So here we'll return an object. We'll spread out the base data, but we'll also include the email property. So here we'll say the email is equal to profile.email. And this is specific to GitHub OAuth. If you've requested a user's email, it's going to be on the profile as the email property, but by default, that isn't included in the base data, which is why we need to override this to include the email. So now that we've done this, we need to register this GitHub strategy. So right here, I'll just say auth service dot, weird. Okay, the docs say auth service, but my code does not. Did this change? I think that might need to be updated in the docs. We're gonna keep it the way it is. Okay, now that we've created our service, we need to register it. So right here, I will say authentication.register, and we'll call it GitHub. and we'll pass in a new instance of the GitHub OAuth strategy. There we go. And just like that, our app is set up to log in with GitHub. And we can actually try it out. So if we go to the browser and we go to our app at localhost 3030 slash OAuth slash OAuth, wait, I can do this, slash OAuth slash GitHub. Oh my goodness, let's try again. Slash OAuth slash GitHub. Why am I typing a period? Okay, let's start that over. So if we visit localhost 3030 slash OAuth slash GitHub, we should be redirected to GitHub. Awesome. And so this takes us to the authorization screen. And once the user clicks authorized, they'll be redirected back to our app. The backend service will handle creating that user, inserting them into our database, and then we'll be good to go from there. So I'll just click authorize. And there we go. And actually, if we take a look at our data directory, we can see any users that got created. If we click in here, we can see that the GitHub user that I just logged in with actually got inserted into our database. We have their GitHub ID, which we set up earlier in one of our hooks. We have their Gravatar URL, and that user was successfully signed up. Awesome. So in the next video, we'll actually create a front end where the user can type their username and password to log in, or they can click a Get Login with GitHub button to actually use our chat application. See you there. Lots of pro editing involved. I couldn't type a slash. Oh. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, Andre, I'm not familiar with P5.js, so Mike is asking, can you do a video on deploying the app? I definitely can. So if you tuned into I think it might have been the second live stream that I did last weekend. I actually did deploy this thing to Heroku, but there were quite a few things that I figured out along the way that I could I could talk about because this should work. The one thing about it though is because we're using NeDB. When a Heroku app goes down, all of the data goes down with it. So I actually do have the login with GitHub working. So the database messages aren't saved. I think what I would probably do is I would show you maybe how you can have we could actually have conditional logic when the service gets registered. And so we can say, like, if we're in production, let's use a service that's backed by MongoDB. But if we're in development, let's use a service that's backed by NeDB. And that way, when we deploy, it'll talk to a real database and the messages won't go away. But that would be fun to do. Yeah. Okay. So the next part is building the front end. And I think I'm going to save that for another day. So I've been streaming for about 2 hours and 40 minutes now. And essentially, the last time that I did this, I kind of just copied and pasted the code because there's a lot, and I really want to figure out what's a better way to present this information, like little by little, where we have like an app working little by little instead of kind of just like pasting everything in and it all just works. So yeah, I'll have to think about that. But I think for now, that's all I've got in me, and pay attention to the channel. Edited videos will be coming out soon. You can all of these typos and weird mistakes, they're going to be magically gone, and you'll have like a nice 5-minute video that just describes what the thing is. So that'll be fun. I will stick around for like 2 or 3 more minutes in case anyone has any lingering questions, because I know this has been a way less interactive live stream because I have been just like recording things. So if you have questions, let me know. I will just sit here and drink my LaCroix. Let's put a timer on. 5 minutes. Do you want to know what 5 minutes feels like? Thanks, Anne. Harsh says, "Oh, you are still here." Yep, I'm hanging out. Yeah, thanks, Anne. Actually, Anne, did you have any questions about the stuff that I had talked about? It seems like you might know feathers a lot better, especially if you're already working with feathers plus and the that join method. Let me look at that for a second. That would be interesting to look at. This thing. Eddie is asking, do I think I'll go into management in my career? I hope not. I want to code. I want to keep coding. So I think I'll probably go into potentially like a principal role or like an overseeing architect role, but I don't want to stop writing code. Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I could set an example for how to be a senior developer and how to mentor juniors and stuff like that. But I still want to be technical, so I don't think I'm going to go into management. Fast join. Hmm. Andrew says learn P5 and make a logarithmic frequency spectrum analyzer. I'll think about it. If you go to my GitHub repo, well, my GitHub page, and then there's a repo called landscaping. Anyone that has requests for types of videos for me to make, you can open an issue here, and that helps us keep track of them. Oh, I see. Okay, so in this particular example, the query returned an item from the database that had a user ID property and a star IDs array. So the join is essentially like select from user or join with user where ID equals that, and this is select all from star where ID in array. Yeah. Um, Anna's saying this is my first Vuex feathers Vuex project, so I'm still learning. It's a never-ending highway of speed bumps. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, though, like once you get it all working, it's a beautiful thing. Feathers Vuex, because it takes very little code to get lots of stuff done. But let's see what this thing is doing. So to resolve the author, essentially we need to find the user ID with that given ID. So we get the post post.author users.find where ID equals post.user ID. Oh, I see. Post.author equals. So we're setting an author property on here where the ID of the user equals that. Okay. Simple enough. And then this is probably doing like a where in query. So the starers are going to be users.find where all of the IDs are in the star IDs array. And we only want their name property, so we say select name. Very interesting. I can see how this can get a lot more complex. But I think, yeah, the way to think about it is you essentially have resolvers for any properties which are just, numerical values, and that will actually populate them. I guess technically you could write it by hand, because if we look at the populate user method which we wrote, or the hook which we wrote, it's kind of doing the same thing. So every message has a user ID property on it, and then the populate user hook will go through, search the user's service for any user with that ID, and then add a user property to the message. So it's very similar. I think if the fast join hook is like getting too complex or too weird to figure out or customize, you might end up just writing a custom hook. I'm curious if this would like actually do all of this maybe in a single query versus having to do a separate query. But yeah, let's take a quick stretch. Example with recursive operations. Oh, yeah, so in this one, it's recursive because you want to go through and select all of the comments, and that needs to populate the user. Interesting. That's an interesting hook. We can save that for a future episode. Maybe I can implement something like that. Andre is still asking about P5JS logarithmic frequency spectrum analyzer. I don't know. I haven't seen one. Eddie is asking, any good resources for learning React hooks aside from the docs? I've really only learned from the docs. I think Wes Boss and Scott Talinsky, Level Up Tuts, might be doing a React hooks course. I don't know. Let's see. Let's look at Wes Boss. Courses. Level Up Tuts. Doesn't he have a website? What's the website? Oh no. I almost exited my streaming software. DuckDuckGo did not find the level up. Yeah, leveluptutorials.com. Tutorials. Gatsby and Shopify, DevTools and debugging. Yeah, not that I know of. Kingdaro just mentioned that Dan Abramov has a lot of posts about hooks, so you can check those out. In the future, I'll be doing some stuff on hooks. And let's just search for hooks. Oh, yeah, this app I actually built with hooks. You can look at the GitHub repo. I think in this video I was just myself learning about hooks, but they got like slightly complicated because I was doing like set timeout type things in the hook. Let's just look at my hook code really quick. So we had components. Yeah, I believe the Scoville meter has some hooks because it needed to animate the like going up to a particular Scoville thing. Yeah, so I had use effect and use state. So use state is just creating an array of all the levels. Let's just show you what I'm actually talking about. So this thing. So this right here is a React component, and when it loads, it basically animates the levels going up by only adding a level in every second or so until it reaches the maximum amount, like that, or like that. So I used an effect to slowly update that array until it reaches the desired length. So our state is the displayed levels, like what you can actually see, and then the effect just keeps setting a timeout if it needs to display more. So if the displayed levels.length is not the desired length, then we push in a new level and update the state. And then 100 milliseconds later, it does the check again, and then basically just keeps doing this until it has the right length. So that's a pretty simple hook. Let's see what else. Look at the sauce viewer. Does it have any? Yeah, this is just a basic component. Basic component. Yeah, so I was doing some interesting stuff here. I think because did I actually use the router? I may or may not have used a router, and then I had my own custom logic in an effect to check the URL to decide if it needed to update the information on the page. I don't know. That might be something to check out. Oh yeah, hello Matcha, who mentions Academine. Academine is great. I've recommended him for like Vue tutorials and stuff like that. Hooks. Oh, Ben Awad is another one. He had some videos a while back where he was building, I think, like a Slack clone. He's got tons of tutorials. Check him out too. Ben Awad, Academind, check them all out. All right, I'm gonna head out. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This was fun. Like I said, pay attention to the channel, I guess, if you care. But these videos will be coming out gradually as I edit them, and sometime this week we'll record the front end videos as well. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, everyone check out the new logo. Ta-da! I think it's pretty cool because, like, if I'm talking about certain technologies, I can put them within the curly braces. It's actually very minimal. I don't know. All right, wherever you are in the world, wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. Until then, here's this.